There is a specific kind of nightmare that haunts the commanders of armored brigades, a scenario that keeps logistical officers awake at night and makes the blood of combat engineers run cold. It is not an enemy ambush or a drone swarm, or even a kinetic strike from an opposing air force, though all of those are terrifying in their own right. The nightmare is physics. It is the sudden, catastrophic realization that your 65-ton main battle tank, the apex predator of the modern battlefield, has ceased to be a weapon of war and has instantly transformed into a 65-ton paperweight. When an M1 Abrams tank throws a track in deep mud, or takes a mobility kill from an improvised explosive device, or simply suffers a catastrophic engine failure in the middle of a hostile kill zone, the illusion of invincibility shatters. The most sophisticated armor package in the world becomes a liability. A stationary tank is a coffin, and a disabled tank left behind is a propaganda victory for the enemy. This is the central conflict of armored warfare that rarely makes the highlight reels. The desperate, gritty, high-stakes struggle to recover the unrecoverable. For decades, the United States military has relied on a specific beast of burden to solve this impossible equation. It does not have the glamour of the Abrams or the infantry carrying capacity of the Bradley M2. It looks, quite frankly, like a relic from a bygone era, a hulking, boxy silhouette that seems out of place next to the sleek, low-profile turrets of modern armor. This is the M88 recovery vehicle, specifically the upgraded M88A2 Hercules. The name Hercules is not just a clever moniker, it is an acronym standing for Heavy Equipment Recovery Combat Utility Lift and Evacuation System, but the mythological reference is entirely appropriate. This machine is tasked with the labors that no other vehicle can perform. It is the only vehicle in the American inventory capable of single-handedly winching, towing, and rescuing a combat-loaded M1A2 SF version 3 Abrams without burning out its own transmission or snapping its chassis in half. But here is the uncomfortable truth that we need to address right at the start. This essential machine, this backbone of the armored division, is fighting a losing war against weight. The story of the M88 is a story of an engineering arms race between the tanks we build and the machines we build to save them. As the Abrams has grown heavier, adding depleted uranium armor, active protection systems, and urban survival kits, it has pushed the physics of recovery to the absolute breaking point. We are looking at a system designed on a chassis from the 1950s, trying to wrestle with the mass of 21st century warfare. The central mystery we need to unravel is how this Cold War dinosaur has managed to stay relevant, and what happens when the physics of leverage and horsepower simply run out of room. This is not just about engines and winches. It is about the strategic reality that if you cannot recover your armor, you do not actually own it. You are just leasing it until it breaks. If detailed technical breakdowns of military design and strategy interest you, subscribe. I have got more of these coming. To truly understand the M88A2 Hercules, we have to strip away the modern digital paint job and look at the bones of the beast. The lineage of this vehicle is ancient by modern military standards. The original M88 was introduced in 1959, utilizing the chassis and automotive components of the M48 Patton and the M60 series of tanks. While the rest of the armored core moved on to gas turbine engines and composite armor, the recovery community stuck with what they knew. The hull is a cast steel design, a technique that has largely fallen out of favor in modern tank manufacturing, but remains incredibly durable for the kind of abuse a recovery vehicle takes. When you look at an M88, you are looking at a lower hull that shares DNA with the tanks that fought in Vietnam. This creates an immediate engineering paradox. The suspension and drivetrain were originally designed for a 50-ton vehicle, but the modern Hercules weighs nearly 70 tons fully combat loaded, and it is expected to tow another 70 tons behind it. The structural design is dominated by the massive armored superstructure that rises from the chassis. Unlike a tank with a rotating turret, the M88 has a fixed casemate. This provides a large internal volume for the crew and the massive winching drums, but it also creates a high profile. Standing over 3 meters tall, the Hercules is a large target. The designers attempted to mitigate this with sloped armor on the front glacis, intended to deflect incoming fire, but protection was never its primary offensive capability. The protection philosophy of the M88A2 is focused on survival in a non-linear battlefield. In the original A1 variant, the armor was barely sufficient to stop heavy machine gun fire. The A2 upgrade, however, added substantial armored overlay panels. These slabs of steel bolted onto the hull provide protection against up to 30mm autocannon fire and artillery splinters. This upgrade was essential because recovery crews often have to operate under fire, but it came with a heavy price. The added armor alone increased the vehicle weight by several tons, eating into the power-to-weight ratio that is so critical for mobility. Under the hood, or rather deep within the rear engine bay, lies the beating heart of the Hercules. It is a masterpiece of industrial brute force, the Continental AVDS 179 012-cylinder air-cooled diesel engine. For the A2 variant, this engine was up-tuned to produce 1,050 horsepower. You need to appreciate the distinction of it being air-cooled. There is no radiator to puncture, no coolant lines to burst, and no water pumps to fail. In the brutal heat of the Iraqi desert or the freezing cold of Eastern Europe, an air-cooled engine is remarkably resilient. However, the trade-off is thermal management. This massive block of iron radiates heat like a blast furnace. The exhaust grills on the rear deck are large enough to lose a wrench in, and the thermal signature of an M88 working hard is visible to infrared sensors from miles away. This engine is coupled to an XT1410 transmission, a cross-drive system that allows the vehicle to pivot turn, spinning its tracks in opposite directions to rotate in place. This maneuverability is not a luxury. It is a necessity when you are trying to maneuver a 140-ton train of vehicles through a narrow urban street. But mobility is only half the equation. The defining feature of the Hercules, the thing that makes it a recovery vehicle, is its winching and lifting gear. This is where the engineering gets fascinating and dangerous. The M88A2 is equipped with 2 winches. The first is the main recovery winch. This is a massive drum located horizontally in the hull, carrying nearly 300 feet of 32mm steel wire rope. In the previous A1 version, the winch could pull about 45 tons. That sounds like a lot, but remember, suction is the enemy. A 60-ton tank stuck in mud does not require 60 tons of force to move. It might require 80 or 90 tons to break the suction of the mud. The A1 simply could not do it. It would stall out, or worse, the vehicle itself would be dragged toward the stuck tank. To solve this, the A2 Hercules introduced a more powerful winch capable of a 70-ton constant pull, and much more when using a snatch block to create a 2-to-1 mechanical advantage. But physics dictates that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. If you pull with 70 tons of force, something has to hold you in place. This brings us to the spade. Located at the front of the vehicle is a massive hydraulically operated earth anchor. Before a heavy pull, the crew lowers this spade and drives the vehicle forward to bury it deep into the soil. This transfers the horizontal force of the pull into the earth itself. Without the spade, the winch is useless. However, the spade introduces its own set of problems. In urban environments, on concrete or asphalt, the spade cannot dig in. It just slides. This forces crews to find creative, often desperate solutions, like bracing the vehicle against a building or daisy-chaining multiple vehicles together to create enough dead weight to pull a disabled Abrams. Then there is the A-frame boom. Folded flat along the top of the hull when not in use, this A-shaped lifting arm is the crane of the system. On the M88A2, the boom was significantly reinforced. It can lift 35 tons. Why 35 tons? Because that is the approximate weight of an M1 Abrams turret. This capability allows the Hercules to perform one of the most complex field repairs imaginable, lifting the turret off a tank to replace a blown power pack or transmission in the field. The boom creates a nested loop of engineering challenges. To lift 35 tons over the front of the vehicle, the suspension had to be locked out. If the suspension springs compressed under that load, the vehicle would tip forward. So the Hercules has a hydraulic lockout system that turns the suspension into a rigid block during lifting operations. This puts immense stress on the road wheels and the torsion bars, leading to frequent maintenance requirements. Every solution on the Hercules creates a new maintenance burden. The upgraded armor made the vehicle heavier, which required a stronger engine. The stronger engine and heavier transmission required a beefier suspension. The beefier suspension and the sheer mass of the vehicle increased the ground pressure, meaning the M88A2 is actually more likely to get stuck in soft ground than the tanks it is supposed to rescue. It is a constant balancing act. The tracks are wider than standard tank tracks to help distribute this weight, but ground pressure remains a critical tactical limitation. If the terrain is too swampy for an Abrams, it is definitely too swampy for a Hercules. This reality forces commanders to think very carefully about where they send these assets. Losing a tank is bad. Losing the only vehicle capable of retrieving that tank is a catastrophe. We must also talk about the Auxiliary Power Unit, or APU. Located on the right rear fender, this small diesel engine provides hydraulic and electrical power when the main engine is off. This is critical for silent watch operations or for operating the ramp and boom without firing up the noisy, fuel-guzzling V12. However, the placement of the APU on the exterior makes it vulnerable to damage from collisions or shrapnel. It is a small detail, but in the field, the loss of an APU means the crew has to run the main engine for every minor task, burning through fuel reserves and increasing engine hours, accelerating the wear on that precious power plant. Let us transition now to the weaponry. You might think a recovery vehicle does not need much firepower, but the M88 crew often operates in the rear guard or in unsecured zones where ambushes are common. The primary weapon is a mounted M250 caliber heavy machine gun located in a cupola on top of the superstructure. In the A2 version, this station is surrounded by armored glass and steel shielding, known as the Gunner Protection Kit. It offers decent visibility and protection, but it is still a manual system. The commander has to stand up in the hatch to fire it. In an age of remote weapon stations where the crew can fire from inside the hull using joysticks and screens, the M88 retains a very visceral manual interface with combat. There is something almost anachronistic about a 70-ton vehicle relying on a man in a hatch with a 50 cal for defense, but it fits the rugged, no-nonsense philosophy of the design. Now we must bridge the gap between these cold specifications and the hot, dirty reality of operating this machine. The manual says the M88A2 can tow 70 tons. It says the winch has a braking strength of 140,000 pounds, but the manual does not tell you what it sounds like when a tow cable snaps under tension. It sounds like a gunshot from a howitzer. The stored kinetic energy in a steel cable under that much load is enough to slice a man in half or decapitate anyone standing in the wrong place. Veterans of recovery crews speak of the triangle of death, the geometric area between the winch, the snatch block, and the target vehicle. You do not stand there, ever. If a cable snaps, it whips back with the speed of sound. The operational reality of the M88 crew is a life of grease, mud, and extreme physical exertion. This is not a push-button war. When a tank throws a track, it means one of the massive distinct metal links has broken, or the track has walked off the sprocket. To fix this, the Hercules crew has to use their vehicle to lift the corner of the 60-ton tank. Then, they have to manually wrestle with the track links. Each link of an Abrams track weighs heavily, and a section of track is an immovable object for a human. They use sledgehammers, crowbars, and hydraulic jacks. They are often doing this in knee-deep mud, in freezing rain, or in the blistering heat, all while wearing body armor. And they are often doing it while the rest of the convoy has moved on, or while taking sporadic fire. The interior of the M88 is loud and cramped. Unlike the Abrams, which separates the crew from the fuel and ammunition, the Hercules crew sits right on top of the hydraulics and winch drums. The noise of the winch under load is a groaning metallic screech that vibrates through the hull. The smell is a mixture of diesel fumes, hydraulic fluid, and sweat. The driver sits low in the front, looking through periscopes that offer a limited field of view. Driving a Hercules is like driving a two-story building from the basement window. You have no rear visibility without the commander guiding you. Backing up to a disabled tank to hook up a tow bar is a delicate dance. If the driver hits the disabled tank too hard, he can damage the sensors or the gun tube of the tank he is trying to save. Consider the thunder runs into Baghdad during Operation Iraqi Freedom. M88 crews were right there in the column. When a lead tank took a hit, the column could not stop. The M88 had to rush forward, hook up under fire, and drag the damaged vehicle out of the kill zone. This is where the rigid tow bar comes into play. You cannot tow a 60-ton tank with a rope down a highway. If the towing vehicle breaks, the towed tank will smash into it. A rigid V-shaped tow bar keeps the vehicles separated. Installing this tow bar is a two-man job at minimum. The bars are made of solid steel and are incredibly heavy. Trying to align the pins while adrenaline is pumping and tracers are flying overhead is a test of nerves that few other soldiers experience. There is also the matter of the short track. When an Abrams loses a track completely and it cannot be put back on, the M88 crew might have to short track it, breaking the track loop and reconnecting it so it bypasses a damaged road wheel. This allows the tank to limp home, but it effectively ruins the suspension on that side if driven too far. It is a battlefield triage decision. The M88 commander is not just a tow truck driver, he is a diagnostician. He has to look at a tangled mess of steel and rubber and decide in seconds, can we fix this here? Do we tow it, or do we strip the sensitive gear and blow it in place? That last option, denial, is the failure state everyone works to avoid. Knowing what you now know about its performance in the field, do you think the design trade-offs were worth it? Share your thoughts below. Let us compare the M88A2 to its contemporaries to understand where it sits in the global hierarchy. The German Bundeswehr uses the Bergepanzer III Buffel based on the Leopard 2 chassis. The British use the CRARRV based on the Challenger 2. Notice a pattern? Most modern armies build their recovery vehicles on the same chassis as their main battle tank. This makes logistical sense. They share engines, transmissions, and track parts. If the tank can go there, the recovery vehicle can go there. The United States is unique in retaining a legacy chassis, the modified Patton hull, to rescue its modern Abrams fleet. This decision has pros and cons. The pro is that the M88 is a dedicated design. The hull shape with its high winch room is optimized for winching, whereas a tank chassis converted for recovery often has to compromise on internal volume. The con, however, is the lack of commonality. The M1 Abrams uses a Honeywell AGT 1500 gas turbine engine. The M88 uses a Continental diesel piston engine. This means an armored brigade needs two different types of fuel specialists, two different sets of spare parts, and mechanics trained on two completely different propulsion systems. It complicates the supply chain. Furthermore, the Leopard-based Bergepanzer has a suspension system that matches the tank it rescues. The M88 struggles to keep up with the Abrams cross-country. The Abrams can fly over rough terrain at 40 kilometers per hour thanks to its advanced torsion bars and rotary shock absorbers. The Hercules, with its older suspension and higher center of gravity, has to take it slower or risk bouncing the crew to death or throwing its own track. This speed differential is a tactical liability. In a rapid offensive, the combat trains, the logistics and recovery elements often fall behind the combat elements. This creates a gap. If a tank goes down 10 miles ahead of the recovery vehicle, the offensive momentum stalls while they wait for the Hercules to catch up. This logistical tail is the Achilles heel of modern blitzkrieg tactics. The designers know this. That is why there is constant talk of modernization, but the budget always prioritizes the shooters over the movers. One of the most specific and harrowing operational challenges involves the mire scenario. When a tank is bellied out, meaning the hull is resting on the mud and the tracks are spinning freely in the soup, the resistance is enormous. We are talking about overcoming not just the weight of the tank, but the vacuum suction of the mud. In these cases, the M88A2's main winch is often routed through a pulley block attached to the stuck tank, then back to the Hercules, doubling the pulling force. But this doubles the load on the spade. If the ground is soft, the spade will just plow through the earth like a plowshare, and the Hercules will slide toward the tank. Crews have to dig manual holes for the spade or find trees to anchor to. It is a physics problem solved with sweat and diesel. There is also the issue of the slave start. The Abrams turbine engine requires a tremendous amount of electrical power to start. If a tank's batteries are dead, the M88 can connect a slave cable, a thick, heavy electrical umbilical cord, to jump-start the tank. This requires the Hercules to position itself dangerously close to the tank. In a combat zone, having two high-value targets stationary and connected by a cable is a drone operator's dream. The crew has to execute this quickly, coordinating over the intercoms, watching the voltage gauges, and praying the connection holds. The psychological impact of the M88 cannot be overstated. For a tanker, seeing the silhouette of the Hercules cresting the hill is the greatest relief imaginable. It means you are not walking home. It means you are not abandoning your mount. The crew of the M88 knows this. They take a perverse pride in their unglamorous status. They call themselves trackheads or grease monkeys, but they know they hold the division together. They are the ones who venture out when everyone else is huddling in bunkers. They are the ones who recover the remains of tanks that have been destroyed, a grim duty that requires a strong stomach and a respectful silence. They see the aftermath of kinetic energy penetrators and shaped charges up close. We must also address the modernization efforts. The limitations of the A2 have led to the development of the M88A3. This is the future, and it attempts to solve the paradox we established at the beginning. The A3 eliminates the torsion bar suspension entirely and replaces it with high-drop pneumatic suspension units. This allows the vehicle to squat or lock out its suspension without mechanical blocks, and it improves cross-country speed to keep up with the Abrams. It also introduces a more powerful engine and, crucially, an upgraded braking system. You might not think about brakes as a primary feature, but when you are towing 70 tons down a hill, brakes are the only thing keeping you alive. The A2 relies on mechanical brakes that can fade under heat. The A3 aims to integrate better dynamic braking. But even with the A3, the fundamental conflict remains. Tanks are getting heavier. The Abrams X demonstrator and future main battle tank concepts hint at lighter weights, but history shows that armor packages always grow. We add active protection systems, electronic warfare suites, and more power generation. The M88 is chasing a moving target. It is a race between the shield makers and the shield movers. The A2 variant is currently the workhorse, and it is being pushed to its absolute limit. There are reports of frames cracking over time due to the stress of towing the latest SEP version 3 Abrams. The metal itself is fatigued. We are asking a design from the 50s to do the work of the 2020s, and the metal is groaning under the strain. The legacy of the M88 Hercules is one of silent competence. It has served in Vietnam, the Gulf War, the Balkans, Iraq, and Afghanistan. It has recovered thousands of vehicles and saved countless millions of dollars in hardware. But more importantly, it has saved lives. Every tank recovered is a crew that did not have to dismount in a kill zone. Every hull drag performed under fire is a testament to the bravery of the recovery crews. They are the insurance policy of the Armored Division. When we assess the M88A2 Hercules, we have to look past the specifications. Yes, it has a 1,050 horsepower engine. Yes, it can pull 70 tons. But the real story is the gap between what it was designed to do and what it actually does. It was designed to pull M60 tanks that weighed 50 tons. It is now pulling M1 A2 Abrams tanks that weigh nearly 75 tons with mine plows attached. It is doing this with an air-cooled engine in deserts that reach 120 degrees Fahrenheit. It is a triumph of mechanical over-engineering and crew adaptability. The verbal bridges between these topics, design, engine, winch, reality, all lead back to that central conflict, the tyranny of weight. The M88 defeats this tyranny not with advanced technology, but with leverage, hydraulics, and raw torque. It is a machine that solves problems by applying overwhelming force in a slow, controlled manner. In a world of hypersonic missiles and cyber warfare, the M88 is a reminder that war is still heavy. It is still about moving steel across dirt, and when that steel stops moving, you need a monster to get it going again. As we look to the future, the role of the recovery vehicle will only become more critical. With the rise of autonomous combat vehicles, the question arises, will we need autonomous recovery vehicles? Or will the intricate, unpredictable nature of recovery, the need to assess mud depth, the need to rig complex pulley systems, the need to improvise, always require a human hand? For now, the M88A2 Hercules remains the answer. It is the unsung hero, the towing service of the apocalypse, ensuring that the tip of the spear remains sharp and mobile. If you found this analysis useful, a like helps more people discover these deep dives. Thanks for watching.